Did you know the Bears currently have 15 undrafted free agent rookies on the roster? Pairing with the 11 draft picks, that gives us 26 rookies on the roster this year. What up, guys? Swift here, covering everything Chicago Bears. Most of you could probably name the 11 rookies, especially after I finished my breakdowns this weekend. But how many of you could have named the 15 undrafted rookies on the roster? Don't worry, I got you covered today. To be honest, if you asked me a week ago, I wouldn't have been able to name all 15 either. Maybe 12 to 13, though. I was asked a question for my Q&A about what undrafted free agents I see making the roster, so let's get started by getting to know the UDFAs a little bit better. There are a total of 15, 9 defensive players, 5 on offense, plus a long snap. Foles never forgets about special teams. Let's talk a bit about each of the 9 defensive players. We got 3 linebackers, 4 defensive backs, a defensive tackle, and a defensive end. Let's talk a bit about the 3 linebackers first. First up is Christian Albright, the linebacker from Ball State. I watched a bit of tape on Albright and I love his game. He seems like a guy who could fit what Flus is looking for and stick around. He has a knack for making plays and forcing turnovers. He had 15 sacks, 2 interceptions, and 9 forced fumbles. Go with 34 tackles for a loss at Ball State. I think he has a good chance at making the roster. Linebacker is one of our weakest positions from a depth standpoint. Next up is CJ Avery from Louisville. He's a former safety who's good in coverage and can make plays in the backfield. Out of the 3 linebackers, I think he has the toughest road ahead of him, but his play on special teams could easily get him a roster. Next up is Jack Sanborn from Wisconsin. I think Sanborn is almost a lock to make the roster. He is a good fit as a Sam linebacker, and if Matt Adams gets in trouble or doesn't impress, Sanborn could end up being a starter this season. He's a good, solid tackler, and I think he makes the roster. Now we're going to get into the defensive backs a little bit. My favorite out of the defensive backs is John Alexander, the safety from Charlotte. I love his game. He impressed during rookie camps and then continued that momentum and looked good at the recent mini camps. Alexander seems to be on his way to earning a spot on this roster as a backup safety. Then we have 3 more defensive backs: Ali Green from Missouri, Jalen Jones from Mississippi, and AJ Thomas from Western Michigan. I lumped all 3 of these guys together. I believe their shot at making the roster comes down to special teams contribution. This will be decided during training camp. Jalen Jones stands out as a. Then we have Micah Dew Treadway, defensive tackle from Minnesota. He has a shot at making it because our defensive tackle depth isn't that impressive. Next up is Micah Dew Treadway, defensive tackle from Minnesota. He has a shot at making it because of our defensive tackle depth is lacking. We have to see if he can make an impression. Next up is defensive end Carson Taylor from Northern Arizona. He got time with the second team during camp. He's a bit undersized at 241, but he's an impressive pass rusher with legit speed and quickness. He was made famous for a rep where he made Tevin Jenkins look bad. People overreacted to that, but Taylor has made multiple positive impressions. As a 240-pound pass rusher, he should look good in shorts. It'll come down to what happens when he has the pads on. If he looks good in preseason, he should earn himself a roster. My player on the defensive side with the best odds of making the roster goes to Jack Sanborn. Before we get into the offensive players, meet Antonio Ortiz, long snapper from TCU. Nobody cares about a long snapper unless there's issues. It's a very underrated special teams job. Bears currently have Patrick Scales, longtime Bear. I do think Ortiz has a shot to win the job. He's young and athletic. I think taking Scales' job would be hard, but don't rule out Antonio Ortiz. Now let's get to the 5 players on offense. We will start with the 2 tight ends fighting for a roster spot: Chase Allen from Iowa State and Jake Tongas from Cal. With emerging youngster Cole Kmet and 2 solid but unspectacular backups in Ryan Griffin and James O'Shaughnessy, tight end is actually one of our deepest groups on the roster, making it an uphill battle for either of these players. I liked Tongas a lot and included him in one of my UDFA spotlight videos earlier in the offseason. Chase Allen has made an impression during minicamp though. Some years I would say we could keep 4 tight ends, But with our running back depth and having a fullback on the 53-man roster, I don't see it as likely this year. They would have to beat out one of the veterans to make the roster. It's possible, but not probable. I see both guys potentially sticking around on the practice squad. Then we get to Gene DeLance, tackle from Florida. Of all the tackles polls brought in, DeLance has the longest arms. I'm excited to see what he does in camp and preseason. I think DeLance has a shot to make the roster as we don't have much established depth. Like everything else on the offensive line, though, we simply won't know until the pads come on. Now we get to wide receiver Kevin Shaw from Liberty. Shaw made an impression at rookie minicamp and he beat out guys like Henry Litwin and Cyrus Holder. Our wide receiver group is deeper than people think after bringing in 5 veteran free agents and drafting Velus Jones. Other than Mooney, Pringle, and Velus, no other wide receiver spot is guaranteed, so Shaw has a chance. And then lastly, we get to running back DeMontre Tuggle from Ohio. He faces a huge uphill battle to make the roster. I think he would either have to blow everyone away during camp and preseason or have a running back injury ahead of him to make the roster. Our running back room is just loaded. Demo, Khalil Herbert, and Ebner are all locks to make the roster, in my opinion. If we keep 4 running backs, which is unlikely to me, we would still have to beat out Darrington Evans to make the roster. At this point, Tuggle is probably the biggest long shot of all the UDFAs. Player on offense with the best shot of making the roster is a toss-up between Kevin Shaw and Gene DeLance. There's probably zero chance I do full breakdowns on all the undrafted free agents, but I might do a couple if these guys make some noise in camp in the preseason. I also might do a Matthew Adams versus Jack Sanborn Sam linebacker video. I appreciate everyone who watches. Hit that like button for me. I have some exciting videos coming over the next few weeks. Stay tuned, and until next time, bear down.